which is smart on their part.
What kind of contracts?
So in their contracts that they signed with the clients, they had a particular
Are we on?
I haven't seen it, but it reads that no matter what, if you're unhappy with
Thank you for joining us this morning for the Oregon State Board of Agriculture meeting. Today is Thursday, June 5th, 2025. This is Elin Miller, Chair of the Board, and this meeting is now officially called to order. Public comment is scheduled today at 11 a.m. We received 2 written public comments ahead of today's meeting. If you'd like to sign up to provide verbal comments, please make a request using the chat box, including your name and organization, or use the sign-up sheet if you're here present at this meeting, which is at our entry table. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The meeting is being recorded, and I'd like to ask board members as well as guests to please state your name for the record before you begin your comments. I'd like to begin by asking the Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator Sherry Kudna to review a few housekeeping items for us, please.
Thanks. Please mute your phones or computer audio during the call to prevent unnecessary background noise. We request only board members and presenters turn on their cameras during the call. If you're joining by conference call only, pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at https://oda.direct/board-agriculture, or will be posted after the meeting. The meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Sherry. Would you now please call the roll for introductions? I'll begin. Elin Miller, Farmer Umpqua.
Chad Allen.
Chad Allen, Dairyman and Tillamook.
Barbara Boyer.
Barbara Boyer, Chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Mike Dill.
Mike Dill, Director of Advocacy and Sustainability at Organically Grown Company.
Ty Kleiwer, he is excused. Miguel Lopez.
Miguel Lopez, grape grower, Willamette Valley.
Kirk Mogg.
Kirk Mogg, Stoll Reeves.
Ellie Norris is excused. Eric Orem.
Eric Orem, Farmer, Hebner.
Josh Zielinski.
Josh Zielinski, Nurseryman, Salem, Oregon.
Dean Simonich will be joining remotely shortly. Director Lisa Sharplow-Hansen.
Good morning, Lisa Sharplow-Hansen, Director present.
And then just a couple additional reminders. Again, please use your chat box as a sign-in to provide your name and organization so we have a record who is joining the meeting remotely. We will monitor the chat box for technical issues only. In general, please refrain from using the chat box to chat with board members or others on the call. Do we have anyone joining the conference call only? If so, we'll take a moment to unmute your phones and state your name and organization for our records. And then pre-meeting materials are posted on our website and will be posted after the meeting.
Great, thank you, Sherry. Before we get started with the minutes, we do have 2 brand new board members, and just to take a few minutes to provide a little bit of background, I'd like to ask each of them to say a few words at this meeting. We're very excited to have a full cadre of members of the Board of Agriculture, so I'll go ahead and start with Kirk Mogg.
Good morning, Kirk Mogg. I grew up on a farm in Eastern Oregon in the other time zone. Vail is my hometown. Came up in 4-H and FFA, went to Oregon State University, go Beavs, majoring in environmental economics. After that, went to law school. Clerked for a judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and for the last 15 years, I've worked as an attorney at Stoll Reeves LLP in Portland, Oregon, primarily representing agribusinesses and timber companies, helping them buy and sell farmland and timberland, and advising them on water rights issues and other environmental issues. I'm deeply invested in ensuring a bright future for Oregon's ag industries and have done that in part through board service, recently rotating off of the board for Oregon Future Farmers of America, or FFA, and off the board of the Cultivating Change Foundation, an organization that focuses on valuing and elevating LGBTQ individuals interested in agriculture. I'm excited to join the board.
Thanks, Kirk, and he's pretty humble. He was a leader, not just on the board for FFA as a chair, chair-elect chair and past chair, and also chaired the joint board that brought the organization together under one unified body. So thank you, Kirk, for joining us. So next, Mike, please.
All right, good morning. My name is Mike Dill. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Sustainability for Organically Grown Company, a produce wholesaler in the Pacific Northwest. I'm a lifelong Oregonian, born in Corvallis, Oregon, and moved, about 4 miles to Philomath, Oregon. That's my longest move. Went to Oregon State University, where I studied food science and technology, chemistry and horticulture. Right out of school, I got a job working for Oregon Tilth, doing audits of organic farms and processing facilities. That took me across the state, across the country, where I got to audit hundreds of operations, many of which were, split operations, what we call split operations that do both organic and non-organic production. So it was a great experience, and then I wanted to do less traveling, so I found a position doing what I like, advocating for farmers in our supply chain, advocating for farmers in general, and just making sure they have the resources that they need to be successful. And then my other passion is sustainability, particularly around waste management, recycling, and finding the best use of our materials that we use for packaging and logistics. So anyways, I'm thrilled to be on the board and excited to meet everyone and get to know the process. Thank you.
Well, welcome, Mike. We're really excited to have you on the board and have your voice as part of the discussion going forward in your perspective. So thank you much for joining us. Next, you have received a copy of the minutes in advance in your board packets. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I so move.
All right, moved by Director Boyer.
Second.
Seconded by Director Lopez. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll have Director Hansen provide her report. And again, we've moved things around a bit, and it's great that we have all the various divisional reports up front too. So this is like all about ODA 101, and with Lisa's preliminary discussion of some of those highlights. So Director.
Great. Well, thank you. And first of all, welcome new board members. We are delighted to have you and to have a full board going forward. I think I'm going to start out with just some highlights of some of the work we've been doing out of the director's office and things that I've been involved in since our last meeting to give you a sense of kind of how busy it's been. We met in March, right after the board meeting. We attended Oregon FFA State Convention, participated, had a booth. We had staff that staffed the booth and interacted with the kids. We were able to join the supporters dinner, and I had the privilege of doing a welcome for the first session, which is always delightful, being at the rock concert, and just a great time interacting with the kids and the energy that's there. I think we're thinking a little bit about how we organize our spring 26 meeting, and if we could maybe line it up to do something to have the board have a bit of that experience. So followed by that, wham bam, the next week we had our agency budget hearing in front of Ways and Means. It went very well. It was probably the smoothest budget hearing I've experienced in my career. And so it was terrific, and I'll let Jonathan talk more about it when he does his portion of the budget presentation. But ultimately, it went really, really well. I don't know if I've shared with you all some of the things that I've done. I just hit 18 months sitting in this chair. It doesn't seem like it, or it seems like forever. I'm not sure. But when I went to OWEB, we started a process of doing quarterly meetings with some different organizations. So the Organic Coalition, the conservation community, and then the ag organizations. We've continued those quarterly check-ins with them. We actually are going to align with OWEB, with the Organic Coalition, and meet with them together to talk about shared issues and maybe do just bring the time together a little bit better in terms of things. April was a really, really busy month. We've had some issues in the grass seed industry. There's a letter that's included in your packet. Given several things, it's unlikely we will be doing price bargaining negotiations this spring. Grass seed is really, really struggling. The market is super soft. And so more to come with that. And if we want to talk about it a little more later, Casey Prentice will be here with us tomorrow probably and can chat because he's the closest to it. But just to know that they really are struggling. In April, Governor Kotek, it was right in the middle of the beginning of the tariff turmoil, is what I'm going to call it. I think I use uncertainty a lot when I talk about what's going on at the federal level. Governor Kotek pulled together a roundtable to talk about tariff and trade with some of our companies. The bulk of the companies that were at the table were agriculture. And so nursery was represented, Pink Shrimp Brewers, the wineries, food processors, Boardman Foods, Bob's Red Mill. There was also a clothing manufacturer that was part of that to talk about what was happening and really how the uncertainties were impacting them in terms of their business. One of the things that was highlighted out of that, our pink shrimp industry has oversupply from last season, and the boats weren't going out because they couldn't move any product. There was a request made, and it was moving through multiple levels, congressional as well, to USDA to do what's called a Section 32 buy. It's a food buy, requesting them to move some of this into the food system. The governor agreed to send a letter to Secretary Rollins to support this buy and the importance to our coastal communities. And that went off. Simultaneously, sometimes you're really, really lucky and timing comes together. NASDA, and for the new members, I am an at-large member on the NASDA board, pulled together a meeting that they had been requesting with Secretary Rollins. And during that meeting, one of the things, as I told the governor's office that I was going, I was asked to take a copy of the letter. And so the letter was actually hand-delivered to Secretary Rollins as well as her receiving it via normal channels. And we were fortunate, as Secretary Rollins left the room, I had her phone number and she said, please have your governor call me. And ultimately, USDA is buying $16 million worth of pink shrimp from our communities. And so it was a tremendous win for Oregon agriculture, tremendous win for the fisheries, and the governor's leadership was tremendous in that as well. While NASDA was in DC, in that same day, it was followed by a quickly put together roundtable that Governor Rollins pulled together for Secretary Rollins pulled together for small farms. A couple of the NASDA board members were able and asked to sit at the table and talk about small farm issues, family farms. I was very fortunate to be one of those. And I was able to talk about Oregon agriculture and the importance of our family farms in the state and what they mean and some of the challenges that they were facing. Most of the farms people represented were kind of East Coast and a little bit of Midwest. But it was an honor to be able to be there and be part of that and represent Oregon. Budget related in the same time frame, We also were in front of the Capital Construction Committee, where we presented our one ODA legislative request for $15 million of general fund bonding to build a one ODA computer system that will link all of our programs together, bring all of our customers together under one umbrella. This really is the vision of Deputy Director Sandow and a passion that he has and has really moved this forward. It was not included currently in our agency base budget. We are still very optimistic, though, as we move towards the into-session bill. But that was the first time, having been in front of Capital Construction and making a request like this. I don't think ODA has had a bonding bill like this previously. And so that was a pretty important event for us. We've also started doing some agency leadership retreats where we're bringing all of the managers in. They like to call it a meeting because it's really not a retreat. We don't go off-site. But spending basically a whole day together. So we had our third one since I came back to the agency in April, and we really focused on core agency services. We had someone from the Department of Administrative Services come over and talk to us about doing quality check-ins, and you may remember as part of the agency expectations that come to me, we need to meet that quarterly check-in. It's a 90% of our staff have to have quarterly check-ins each quarter. We target 100 to get to everybody. And so we've been meeting it in terms of the target, but now we're trying to uplift the quality of those conversations and what they mean in the messages that we're carrying out. We also had a presentation around employee burnout. Last November, we did a Gallup poll looking at, our employees' perceptions and concerns and how they're feeling about things. And one of the things that really rose to the top is within our management structure, we have significant burnout in our managers at all levels, but especially middle managers. And so really trying to start to address that and look at what we can do to help, what are the root causes, and working through that and just hitting it straight on. And it was a very, very well-received presentation. And then we also spent some time talking with all of the managers about the One ODA system and what it means. And it's going to be really great if we get the budget package and the 15 million. But on top of the workload that we currently have, we just put another one. Because the complications and the intricacies of building a full computer system from the foundation is going to be tremendous, and we need to do it right on the front side, and we need to do the planning ahead of time. And so there will be a hefty responsibility in terms of that work going forward. So we're still crossing our fingers, but that was a big bulk of the conversation, along with, we did some team building exercises and some other fun things along the way with it as well. I also had the opportunity to speak to the Northwest Chicken Council, and I'm trying to remember where I was at. It was the CAFO regulations came up in that, and a conversation with dairy. And it's interesting to me, right now we are a dairy deficit state, but it's hard to bring additional dairies on. The same is true in terms of the potential demand for poultry and poultry products. There's opportunity, but figuring out how we site and manage those facilities, I think, is a real challenge. So there is opportunity for us to really engage, I think, in those communities and see if there's room and how we assist going forward and finding the right places. And I think that was my conversation a lot. It's like, how do we find the right places for the facilities so that we can deal with the water quality issues potentially and the community issues? Because if you haven't followed it, we've been involved with a siting in SIO for a poultry facility, and it has been very, very, very challenging. So DC, small farms. We did a slew, is what I'm going to call them, of Commodity Commission appointments. Thank you, Carla. It was a big bunch of them, so a bunch of new Commodity Commissioners coming in. I think we still have positions to fill, and so we have some more work to do there. As those opportunities come up, please, if you know people that want to serve, whether it's a public member or within their commodity, encourage them to apply, because we are having challenges in terms of recruiting people in. And it's a nice first step if people want to get exposure and look for leadership opportunities within the agricultural community. So I would just encourage any help provide us there. We were in Chicago 2 weeks ago? Yeah, I know, Carla, the time has flown. Doing the National Restaurant Association show. I think I mentioned it yesterday. We participated in the NASDA Pavilion that they call Taste of the States with our companies. It was a great success, and I think we're planning and looking for what we're going to do next year, as well as trying to target maybe some other shows domestically that fit some of our niche market opportunities for moving and helping our smaller companies move forward and grow, and really trying to meet people where they're at and give them that stepwise opportunity. As well as there was just a recent announcement and a recruitment went out. Governor Kotek will do a mission to Japan and South Korea in late October, and we're doing a recruitment right now for that. So we have not lost our international focus by any means. We need to continue to grow and maintain those relationships, and maintaining the relationships is incredibly important because it's taken a long time to build them. But with the uncertainty in terms of the international market space right now and the on and off again parts of it, I think we're really looking to see what we can do more locally to help move product here in Oregon. We also participated in the Celebrate Trade celebration that focuses on international marketing. We had 2 agricultural organizations that were honored there, Shaneka Wool, the Carver family, and then the Oregon Seed Council. And the theme was sports, international sports. And you might initially go, well, ag, international sports. Oregon turfgrass is all over the world, and in some of the, most prestigious fields, soccer fields, etc. And Shaneka Wool has provided wool for Olympic uniforms for several different Olympic events. And so it was a really nice fit to highlight agriculture in a different way than you might normally think of it. And so, fun event for sure. We are moving along specialty crop grants. We did get confirmation. We have funding for the next round. It's about $2.25 million, I think, in terms of the dollars, maybe a little bit more than what we've had in the past. And so we are moving those along as well. Just a couple other things. Last week, we had an in-person all-agency staff meeting. We're doing monthly virtual all-agency staff meetings so that we're connecting with our crew across the state and trying to give more access and share information more readily and giving them an opportunity to ask questions. Because when you step back and realize half of our agency is new to their seat in the last 5 years. So there's just a lot of opportunity to connect people. So we're really trying to do more of that outreach as well. And then just to wrap it up, in terms of activities, I started my week in Ontario. I was able to visit the burn area between the Durkee and the Cow Valley fires. I got to spend a half day out in a side-by-side out across the hillsides and looking at how that's healing. It's amazing how much grass is coming back. It's going to take a while for the sagebrush, but there are strong patches around. So I think there's hope. A lot of people are resting that land, this year to let it continue to heal. The lowlands, though, really do see some noxious weed pressures, and that's going to take some time to work through. We then met with the onion industry. Some of you may remember Grant Kitamura, Murakami Produce. They're in a transition to new ownership, and so able to visit with them a little bit about that transition and what's going on there. And then finished Monday with a really nice no-host dinner with industry, and there was, I don't know, probably 14, 16 people from different sectors. Even Jordan, ranchers from the Jordan Valley drove up to have dinner and spend time, and it was really nice because I could spend some one-on-one time chatting with each of them and talking about issues and really thanking many of them for their support as we've worked through some tough issues over the last year legislatively with the brand inspection program and some others. They've really provided leadership, and that has been tremendously helpful. We started Tuesday morning at the Ontario High School, and I wish Casey was in the room, and if we get time, I would love to have him talk to you about it because he just has so much passion. He had the brainchild working with the produce industry in Ontario. There is a need for produce inspectors to help with the FSMA inspections, and some of that in-house inspection for quality and condition. ODA, in partnership with Department of Education, Reynold Gardner, and the Ontario School District, has developed a curriculum that is a CTE. Help me with what CTE stands for. Career Technical Education. I've got to do there's a rhythm to it. Career Technical Education. So there's a class that Susanna Perlstein and another staff person has taught. They had their first 2 seniors graduate with a full USDA produce safety certification. They can go be auditors straight out of high school with this. I think as we're working with the high school over there, they are really focused on career technical education and providing these youth the opportunity to have skills that can go straight into the workforce. And so we're looking at some other places where we might be able to build some of that partnership, but it also ties into FFA as well and the leadership program there. So we are just, incredibly appreciative of the leadership of the advisors there and the superintendent, as well as the principal, and their commitment to youth education to help support that agricultural community. And then I'm trying to think, Tuesday afternoon was with Courtney. Yeah, and we visited Wilson's feedlot outside of Baker in North Powder. Got to do my map. North Powder. And really interesting visit, 6th generation running the ranch, and talked about the different aspects, not just the feedlot piece of it, but the commodity buying and other things that they're doing. And it was a really wonderful connection. I also did staff meetings with local staff while I was in both locations, so in Ontario, and then yesterday I did one here in LaGrande. Most of the staff that came in were the locals that have traditionally done our brand inspection work. And what we spent a lot of time talking about was our initiative to move our Ag Services division along, and the vision we have for Ag Services for providing more full-time work across programs to staff in rural communities across Oregon. And really the hope is, as we continue to move this along, we will have staff that's more local, that can pick up different parts and pieces of work for several of our programs across the agency. It reduces mileage, provides great jobs in rural communities that are incredibly helpful to those economies. And the other piece of it, we're combining management across programs and thinking of it in more of a regional basis And so we won't have a full set of managers for the brands program. We won't necessarily have a full set of managers for the shipping point program. Those managers will be regional and be dispatching staff. So we have a coordinated dispatch system, again, around logistics to try and help provide control costs, but provide better service to our customers across the state. And it's being very well received. It's industry driven. It's been asked for. And as I've talked about it, we can't continue to do business in our other funded programs the way we have in the past. The cost of doing business, inflation, staffing costs have gone up significantly. And we will price ourselves out of being able to do the value of it. And so we want to provide excellent customer service. We want to provide, high value services and still be able to maintain them at a rate that the agricultural industry can afford and support and adds value to what they're doing. So that has been kind of the roundabout of what I've done since I saw you in March. It's been a whirlwind with a lot going on.
I'd say wow. And particularly, I'll note, I clap for the pink shrimp thing because that was just, the fact that Lisa is on the NASDA board as a quote unquote new director, but with her experience and being seen by the NASDA leadership to bring in key leadership roles gives Oregon a unique opportunity. I don't think, well, we had it with Katie. Katie had been a long time NASDA, or a long time service as a director of ag, but it was just kind of, it all came together beautifully. And Lisa, thanks for your leadership and orchestrating all that, plus all the internal stuff you've done. Let's open it to questions, and then we also, are you going to highlight a few other issues?
Yeah, I will.
WAMA and other things too, but questions, comments? Director Orm.
Sorry. Eric Orm for the record. What commodities are going to be highlighted on the international tour?
So we're recruiting companies right now.
So there's no specified,
No, not yet.
like
I'm looking at
nursery or,
Carla.
yeah.
Am I right? We're going to look, we're going to take the applications and then we'll build.
And then build the tour
Yeah.
from that. Okay, thank you. And then on the noxious weed issues in the burn areas, I sit on the FSA committee and I've helped approve miles and miles and miles of fence. But there hasn't been any talk about weed control or rehabilitation of the pastures through those agencies. Did they have any word of a plan
Yeah.
of attack?
That's a great question. So the producer that I toured with talked a lot about the resources that are out there, but the effort that it takes to access them. And so he actually does a lot of grant writing himself, but it takes a long time and it's a lot of effort. And so one of the things that really was an aha moment for me is unless you're really connected and you have some capacity, for smaller producers, I think it's going to be really difficult to connect the dots. So I do think there is opportunity for the SWCDs, the Watershed Council. Ellie was here yesterday. I talked to her about this stuff on a regular basis, just because she's doing the work and it's fun, to engage and bring what I know and share it with her. But there are some funding opportunities that are out there. We talked a little bit, because I asked about virtual fencing, time and space, and this producer wasn't at a spot that he was ready for where he was at, and the construction of it. The one thing he did indicate, they were going to follow all their traditional fence lines, so they didn't have to do the cultural resource survey. He said it would probably be better if they could reconfigure some of the fencing for better rotation, but the challenges in terms of doing that were significant. And so that really was an interesting piece of the tour as well.
So maybe as a follow-on, Director, are you suggesting maybe even a conversation at a higher level with FSA to get USDA kind of focused on, hey, here's this noxious weed effort, and we need to, given everything that's happening, it's kind of tough, but.
Well, and yes, in a way. I would assume that some of those acres are private that are having weed issues, and state lands and federal lands, especially down here or further south with the BLM. And once you remove all that cover, you don't have, it takes a while for the grass to come back for competition, so you do end up with a weed issue. And but it is a good time to address the weed issue because the chemicals that are being used for pasture restoration that we've done through like soil and water in our county, if you get rid of that duff layer on top, because it's soil active, so you spray it on, the water puts it in, and it keeps those annual grasses that are, your cheat grasses, Medusa head, Betonata, and some of your noxious broadleaf weeds from coming. So I just think it's a prime time to do it, and any partnership we can do to get that ball rolling, I think would be very beneficial to the state.
I think we'll have an opportunity as we do the tour today. Troy Abercrombie from our Noxious Weed Program is here, and we're doing a tour, and I think he'll have, he's back there waving at me. Yeah. And we can talk some more about that opportunity. So Lynn Larson from NRCS also toured with us when we were doing burn area.
Great, thank you. Director Mock.
Kirk Mogg for the record. Director Hansen, you mentioned Oregon being a dairy deficit state and some of the challenges with siting poultry facilities. I would say Oregon has developed, there's at a minimum perception that Oregon is anti-animal agriculture, and it seems as though there's an opportunity as we continue to revisit our resolutions to find a way to figure out how Oregon Department of Agriculture can work with the animal agriculture industry and other agencies to make sure that we're collaborating as best we can to change the perception and if necessary, the reality about how we site facilities within the state.
Great. Thank you for that. Great.
Other questions, comments, and then we'll have Director Hansen move on because we have a few other topics she's covering.
So just quick, in your packet, you have the quarterly update on strategic plan activities. We're committed to using this as one of the ways we talk about and hold our feet to the fire around the strategic plan and our implementation of that, as well as when we were together, I think at the last board meeting I shared with you the quarterly reports around the governor's expectations. Sherry and Carla worked together and kind of created a dashboard of only ODA's progress, so you'll have that, and we are going to continue to use that as well to monitor our progress. You have in your packet the division reports, and several division directors, if you've looked through and you have questions, we can definitely address those now or later. And then I wanted to have just a little bit of conversation and a report out around the work that's been done with the Lower Umatilla Groundwater Management Area Rural Advisory Committee, just to keep you all tracking along with us. And I was going to look to Jonathan or Isaac to do that. And I see Jonathan online. I don't see Isaac. So Jonathan, are you at a spot that you could talk about where we're at? I think we've had 3 rules advisory committees now.
Yep. Good morning, Sherry Lynn, Director Sharple Hansen, members of the board, Jonathan Sandow, Deputy Director here at Department of Ag. That's correct. So I think, was it last meeting, we kind of gave an overview of where we were at the Loveguama pieces of, there's really the point source, regulation side of the world up in that basin that includes, the permitted facilities, and then really the non-point source side of the activities. And so, building off of a lot of the work and a lot of the conversations in that basin, we have begun kind of that rulemaking exploration process with, it's about like 21, Eric's on our rack, but there's about 21, 22 of you that sit on that rack, that is looking at the rulemaking side of, kind of water quality rules around our non-point sources. And we've had the three meetings, and really it's looking at some proposed rules that we took from a lot of different states, a lot of different methods, to really, I think the overarching goals there is really to say, are there nutrient management plans that can be put into place to get folks to kind of think through, what's the nutrient load that we're putting on versus what's the uptake, within the cropping cycles. And then layering on top of that also what are we doing with water application, and irrigation, because those are the drivers for the nutrients. That's, pushing them, either pushing it down to the, to the aquifers, or keeping it in the root zone for optimal uptake. And so really just trying to work through, what's the best way to accomplish that in a basin specific region, and tools that work for folks while kind of accomplishing the goals of the water quality. That was really quick, and I'm sure Eric's got a few things that he might want to add to it, but we are planning on, process wise, we have a goal of trying to put draft rules into the bulletin this fall, for public comment. And so getting through the rulemaking process up until the fall time.
Okay, additional comments, Director Orm?
Eric Horn for the record. Correct, I do sit on the rack. It is my first attempt at sitting on a rack, and it is a little intimidating, but I am learning a lot. And I also live just south of the LaGrande area footprint, and farm south of there. Just a few concerns and things that I've noted through the starting of the process is, the draft rules as written currently are a little intrusive, to irrigated ag. There is a 1,000-acre cutoff. And Jonathan, correct me if I'm misspeaking on any of this, but I know the question has come up is if we can come up with the percentage of acres and number of producers above 1,000 and the percentage below 1,000 in that footprint, to make sure, the idea is to have ag be the solution or part of the solution to the problem and not add to the problem. And I think if we're leaving out some of the irrigated ag in that footprint, I don't know that we're going to achieve our goal. Other comments from some producers that the proposed rules as written currently are similar to the process of a DEQ permit or gap audit. And then there is concern about soil lab availability and agronomist availability for certification of the nitrogen plans. And there's just of course, a comment of more regulatory burden on growers that are trying to use best management practices as currently in their farming operations. So it's been very interesting. There are a lot of very intelligent people on the rack that have a lot of different views and information that are available. But I would like to figure out a way, I guess, that would make sure that the rules don't cause us to overthink it or try to find workarounds to make it easier, that growers don't try to find workarounds because just as a quick example, basically every time you apply any nitrogen source, as rules are currently written in the draft, you would do a soil test, and which makes sense on paper because you need to know what needs to be put in the ground. But if you do a pre-soil test on a low-value crop like wheat or corn, and you know how much you're going to need to put on, we would rather, as a grower, apply that in spoon feed it through the season. And currently, the way it's written, you would have to soil test every single time you went to apply, even if you knew from the first soil test that you were going to need to apply, say, so many pounds for the crop to come to maturity. So I guess those are just a couple thoughts that I have so far in this process. And like I said, it's very interesting, and I am learning quite a lot. So.
And Director Hansen, just a second, this is precedential for areas that may have nitrate issues. So really appreciate Director Orem for you highlighting some of those issues, because I think we need to, maybe we can dive a little deeper at our next meeting on where we are on some of these specific things. I know we don't have a ton of time here, but this is really, really important that we get it right. And I think your comment of not having exclusions, if it makes sense to be more inclusive too, is a very good point as well, depending upon what those percentages look like. So
I have had a few producers comment that having a one-page spreadsheet or a 1 or 2 page that they can do a cropping plan that's so it's the same thing every time. So crop, expected yield, amount of, and your plan throughout the growing season that they can then hand into ODA as their cropping plan or their nitrate plan. That would make things simpler, but maybe not having to have a third-party certification, that just turning it in to the Department of Ag to just speed up the process, I guess. Because if you think about the number of cropping plans that are going to have to be submitted in the springtime, it's going to be daunting, quite a process, and number of soil tests throughout the growing season.
Okay. So. Director Hansen.
So thank you for the feedback. I mean, that is, it's important for us to have that. And maybe what we can think about is, let's see, we're back in September. We do some preview of where we're at before we put the rules out for public comment, and talk through maybe what some of those sticky points are, to get some more feedback from all of you. And so we could do a deeper dive than this conversation.
Great. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, super. And I know we're running a little bit over time, but Director Henson, did you have anything else? And we really haven't. I know that some of our board members like to ask some questions regarding the divisional reports too. Maybe what we could do is keep moving, but I think we're going to have more time during the business discussion that we could do that. And I think the right people will be here for that as well. So if we could move on to our next agenda item, which is ODA's budget and legislative update. And I'm glad that Jonathan, Lindsay, and Adam, you're not very busy right now with signing, it's just coming up soon. But anyway, thank you for joining us remotely for this report.
Well, it's much better being there in person, let me tell you. The virtualness is just not the same. I'll kick off and then let Adam and Lindsay kind of fill in and pick up different pieces. Again, good morning, Chair Miller, Director Sharple Hansen, Jonathan Sando, Deputy Director here at the Department of Ag. And I know that we'll try to hit the time period. We don't want to get Troy all worked up about getting some time crunch on him. So we'll kind of be as brief as we can. But the legislative session is we're less than a month away from sine die. Constitutional sine die is June 29th. And it's highly anticipated that we will go right up to that constitutional signing date. And so we will, we will be staying engaged for the full duration. But I think just to give a quick kind of update on where we're at within our process of our own bills, and then where we're at with some of the other policy bills. Director Sharple-Hanson mentioned earlier that the budget bills have moved. And so we are through full Ways and Means committee for our agency budget bill. And so kind of our core funding, those core pieces are through the committee process. They are on the ever rolling third reading calendars for the floor. And so they will just continue to sit there until they get their chance to be heard on the floor. Right now on the House side, they're reading bills in their entirety. So they take a bit of a time to get through everything, but they're sitting there just kind of waiting to be read on the floor. In that package, we have our 3 fee bills that also moved, with our base budget. And then there was a kind of a 4th fee bill that has been wrapped up in there. But the 3 fee bills that the agency introduced at the beginning of the session were around the pesticide fee, registration fee increases, food safety licenses, and then weights and measures fee increases. And then during session, working with the cattlemen and working with Senator Nash and some of those folks, we have Senate Bill 1019, which is kind of the fee increase structure around the livestock ID brands program that made it through all the policy committees and then kind of wrapped up into our base budget as just kind of another fee bill. And so that is, all of those together are in the same process, just kind of sitting on the respective chambers, ready to be read and continue to roll over. Our 3 policy bills that we had, and again, the full summaries are in the board books that we've talked about before, but 3 policy bills, one that added poultry inspections to our state meat inspection program. We didn't have the specific Federal Poultry Act mentioned in statute, and USDA said you got to have it in statute. So we went back and added it explicitly so we could do that work. That has been signed by the governor, and so that is done and through the full process. We have another one for aligning our fertilizer label enforcement language that's in statute with the federal changes that happened. And that one has been signed by the governor as well, and that one's through the full process. The third one is around adding civil penalty authority to our animal health statutes. Right now, we only have criminal authority, and so really anybody who's found in violation of our animal health statutes, quarantines, those types of things, the only true recourse that we have is doing criminal charges at the DA level. And so this is adding some civil penalty authority and more administrative pieces, which is a much more appropriate kind of enforcement response. And that is on the floor, on the House floor, again, just rolling into the continual third reading calendar at this time of year. Those are where all the kind of the agency summary bills are. Yesterday, you heard, the comments around Senate Bill 777, the wolf changes. That has passed. That has been signed by both the Senate President and the Speaker, and we actually just got the documents to send over to the governor's office around a signature there. So she will have 4 or 5 days to sign that bill as well, and so that one is pretty well through the process. That makes the changes to the wolf compensation program. Some other ones, I think that to give more of an update around some other policy bills. Last time the board had written a letter on House Bill 2548, which is the Ag Workforce Standards Board. That bill was since we've written the letter, right, went through the policy committees, went into rules, which is a continually running committee, and had a public hearing. last week, but has not had any work sessions scheduled. And so that one is just kind of staying where it's at for right now. No other actions have been calendared for it. And then the other big policy bill that we're working on right now is Senate Bill 1154, which is kind of the governor's big groundwater package, and that will be up in the Rules Committee next week. And so that one's going to be kind of the last kind of big policy bill that we and other natural resource agencies are directly engaged with. So that is where we're kind of at in a broad spectrum. There's probably a lot of other policy bills that folks are tracking within different channels and within different means. There's a lot of bills that are sitting down in Ways and Means. Those ones, they're still going through agency budget bills this week, and so a lot of those kind of policy bills won't be. Those conversations and those decision points will start being made, in the middle of June, and then to also kind of tie into Director Sharple-Hanson's update around our bonding package as well. Highly optimistic around the potential to get the funding through there. That is also kind of within that same end of session timeline, and so there are a lot of hurry up and wait components to it, but we will know more kind of right when all of those big highly negotiated packages are revealed all together as we get closer to the end of session. So I will pause there, see if Adam, Lindsay have anything that they want to jump in with, but also any questions from board members that the three of us can kind of work through and be able to talk about.
Any questions, comments? So this is the full report, and then no more to add from Lindsay and Adam other than in the question area. I'm looking at timing here, Jonathan.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, the only thing
ahead.
I would potentially add, and Adam, you can speak to this, but there was some changes in the co-chair's recommended budget that differed a little bit from GRB. So Adam, do you want to go through those differing small amounts?
Yes, happy to. Chair Miller, Director Sharple-Hanson, members of the board, for the record, Adam Crawford, Chief Operating Officer for ODA. Yes, by and large, the budget, as otherwise considered, 98, 99% it aligns with the governor's budget as otherwise recommended. A couple minor changes. For example, the governor's recommended budget removes some predator control funding. That funding was restored in the co-chair's recommended budget. Instead, roughly $100,000, slightly more than $100,000 of farm mediation funding was taken, as well as a empty and a vacant microbiologist position within the agency that has been vacant, unfortunately, for a few years now. And so, by and large, a strong budget, as well as some minor changes around our federal funding related to available funding. So, really pleased with the partnership with our legislative fiscal counterparts and the conversations we were able to have within our subcommittee.
Questions, comments? One question, it came up yesterday, was the funding for 777, would that be part of this fiscal or not? I guess I need a little 101 and how that kind of stuff gets funded. It said it's one thing to have the policy move forward on 777, but it's another to make sure the funding is accompanying it. And where exactly might that be?
Yep. So, Chair Miller, the complementary 986 Senate Bill 986 is in Ways and Means, and that would have basically an augmentation of funding into the kind of one-time funding into the wolf compensation program. Typically that is actually just done as part of like what they call, the Christmas tree bill, the end of session bill, where all those pieces, so not the individual policy bills themselves that direct funding, but the one big kind of funding package that happens at the end of session is where those will go through, and in the conversations and along the way with 777, it's well known, I think, even, both on the policy side and the budget side in the building, that those two move together. There was, by the bill sponsors, I mean, it was a conscious effort to kind of decouple them and move them independently, knowing that the policy changes were critical for the program, and that, oftentimes the budget side of it gets complicated. But that's where they're at right now. And there's a good understanding between, the folks that those two do move together, and they do need to survive. Our base budget right now for the program is about $247,000 for the biennium. In 23, we got an extra $1 million. And so we had a lot of, that's a big capacity jump right at the end of session bill. And, that is where the conversation will happen for that one as well.
Great. So it will be at the very end of session in the Christmas tree bill for that finalization or not then?
Yeah, I would say that's where it's going to be considered, right? Like
Consideration, right?
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Ways and means now. So great. Thank you. Also, I did hear that the workforce board, standards board might be a study bill now, that Portland State might be doing the study, but that may be just being discussed.
Yeah.
In rules.
Chair Miller, yeah. So the -7 that was posted is that language, that it would turn into a study bill to Portland State. I kind of the communication right before the public hearing was that might be the pathway. However, there was no work session, and there's no work session planned right now.
Okay.
Kind of as of right now, it's awaiting further action, but that is where it is.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions, comments on legislative update and budget update? All right.
Lindsay has her hand up.
Oh, Lindsay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's hard to kind of see the hands, so sorry. Thank you. Lindsay.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair Miller, Director Sharplo Hansen. I just wanted to give a quick update on the federal side, and also to add a little bit of context to some of those changes. So kind of two big things have happened in coordination with this on the federal side. And as Adam mentioned, our microbiologist 3 position that had been vacant was in our budget as part of our state meat inspection program, but ultimately we did not need a microbiologist position, but we needed more inspector positions. It was kind of I think before we had the program designed that way. But in that same process, as our meat inspection program continues to grow, we NASDA, and with Lisa's assistance, was able to get an extra $16 million in the FSIS budget at USDA to continue to maintain their commitment to pay 50% of state meat inspection costs. So that's something that the states have been working really hard at, and USDA has responded. So hopefully that funding, I think we had talked about it at a prior meeting, that funding will be ongoing, and we will be able to hopefully rely on something closer to 50% of match to the state's investment there. And then I just also wanted to update on our RFSI grants. A lot of our, as we've said before, we haven't had a lot of significant impacts in our federal funding, but one of our big sub-grant programs, pass-through programs, is the RFSI funding. That's about $5 million. And we have recently finally made all of our infrastructure projects out of environmental and cultural review and have been approved. We're working through final legal details, but those infrastructure projects will be starting soon on an accelerated timeline. But there is about, I think, more than $3 million going out for some big infrastructure projects under that program that'll be starting in the next couple months.
Excellent, and that's fantastic news. I like that 16 million. Maybe we could find another 16 million from the feds too, in addition. So,
Great.
Great, thank you, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks you, Adam. I know it's a lot of work and a lot of late hours leading up to Sine Die, and there was a lot this year, and appreciate the department's leadership on everything going on, and hopefully we'll get everything we need out of the budget process and Ways and Means before the end of the session. So thank you. Great. We're a titch bit early, but not too early. If we could go ahead and start the Working Lands in Oregon panel, and have, I don't know who all is physically here, but Troy, Mark, Hillary, and Katie. We're all here. All right, excellent. Wow, thank you. And again, this is a great combination effort with Fish and Wildlife, and it's great that we're going to have a chance to dig a little deeper in this area. So is Troy going to start us off?
Yeah, maybe we can start with a quick round of introductions, and then
Excellent.
We'll go into the presentation.
Great.
Great. Chair Miller, members of the board, good morning. Happy to be here. My name is Troy Abercrombie. I am the program manager for the Native Plant Conservation Program, as well as the Noxious Weed Control Program at the department, and serve as the lead on our two Natural and Working Lands House Bill 3409 funded projects.
I'm Mark Porter with the Oregon Department of Ag Noxious Weed Department. I was recently, or for a decade previous to this season, I was the Noxious Weed Integrated Weed Management Specialist for Northeast Oregon, and I recently switched to be a Rangeland Stewardship Specialist for Eastern Oregon.
Morning, everyone. I'm Hillary Delos. I work with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm a Natural and Working Lands biologist that was funded through the Natural and Working Lands Fund.
Morning, folks. I'm Katie Salter. I also work for ODFW in the Natural and Working Lands program. I am a Natural and Working Lands assistant biologist.
What kind of signal do you want, Sherry?
Whatever works for you.
Let's give you a thumbs up. You can go. So just a little overview of this presentation. You'll hear, we're going to go back and forth, and hopefully that works out pretty well. But what you'll see is we have two agencies, two parallel programs with a lot of intersection points. We'll talk a little bit about the road to how we got here as agencies and as programs to engaging in this work on the range, highlight a lot of the threats that we face, and there are many. The task at hand, really the scale of this work out on the range is kind of the big, for me, kind of the linchpin. The scale that we're trying to work at here is something that is new for a lot of us. But we're making some progress, and so you'll hear a little bit about that. You'll see some of the work that we're doing out in the field that will help inform at a small scale, that will help inform how we attack some of these projects at a much larger scale. So speaking specifically for the noxious weed program, over time we've known and realized that for us as we manage noxious weeds across the state through the program, that it's bigger than the thistles. And that's illustrated somewhat in this picture. You'll see center right, there's two big thistles that are a priority for us. We don't want those things spreading all over the range, but in order to get to them, we had to drive across hundreds or maybe thousands of acres of invasive annual grass. And it starts to maybe not make as much sense sometimes to not be addressing some of the other problems. And as we look at the fire and invasion cycle, we see these interconnected invasion regimes, so we recognize this large-scale context, and because of that scale, we recognize the need to adopt and develop and promote new management frameworks. We've also had a lot of partner engagement, not only with the work on the landscape, but with us here at the department as they seek technical assistance and consultation, as those folks who are engaged in grass work realize that it's more than just the grass. And there's also some financial considerations that kind of get boring, but where we can provide support financially, either as sponsors or sometimes with funding of our own. And then I think most importantly, we recognize that the rangelands, the condition of our rangelands is a priority to the stakeholders, whether we're talking about cattle producers and the ranching industry who depend on private and public rangelands, but also myriad other public user groups who depend on the range for the ecosystem services they provide, recreational opportunities, and all of those kinds of things. So because of that, and recognizing that we are the Department of Agriculture, it makes sense for us to engage on this front.
And I just want to explain a few ways that ODFW is involved and committed to rangeland health. We have a number of staff that work throughout the state to enhance rangelands. Some of our Farm Bill program, or we have 3 Farm Bill biologists that are placed in Klamath Falls, Prineville, and the Dalles that all work in rangeland systems. They work directly with landowners to become involved with NRCS programs and help to manage their rangelands through those programs that are available. We also have the Wildlife Habitat Conservation and Management Program, which is a tax incentive program in eligible counties where landowners can enroll in this to get a tax deferral for their lands. And some amazing voluntary conservation work is completed through that program. We now have our Natural and Working Lands program, which consists of Katie and myself. And we have some projects that were directly funded through the Natural and Working Lands Fund that we manage, but then we're also actively seeking out partnerships, meeting with different groups and agencies to develop projects and to go after funding for those projects at a big landscape scale. And so some of the projects that we are addressing we're kind of in the reactive phase, the reactive and proactive phase, as well as proactive. So we're looking at all spectrum of those phases. We've got projects to address annual grasses before they get too far out of hand. We've got projects to remove juniper that are kind of at the point where it's not an issue yet, but could become an issue in the future if we don't act now. And then we're also looking at experimental use of virtual fence in grazing to encourage to allow co-benefits for ranchers as well as wildlife. So we're kind of in all range of those project types.
I don't need to tell all of you that rangeland is really important in Oregon. Over 18 million acres of our sagebrush rangeland makes up about 1/3 of the state of Oregon. Beef is our #2 agricultural commodity after greenhouse and nursery products in the state, and it nets in about $1 billion annually in direct and indirect income for the state of Oregon. Thankfully, feedlots are not popular in Oregon, so our beef industry relies very heavily on public and private rangeland, with 1,300 grazing permits over 8.3 million acres across the state in BLM land alone.
So the position and what will be 2 positions that are funded here at ODA come by way of House Bill 3409, which we introduced to you at the last board meeting. And that bill really has a focus on carbon sequestration, but also the prevention of carbon loss. And for us, we approach that by looking at creating resilience on the rangeland. We know that resilient rangelands sequester carbon the best, and they resist carbon loss because of their resistance and resilience to wildfire. So we approach this from a resilience standpoint, with invasive annual grass being the big picture. Feel really fortunate to have forged a 5-year partnership, at least so far, with the NRCS that helped us build capacity to hire our first ever rangeland health specialist in December of 2024, Mark Porter here, who you met. We'll hire another one later this year that will help Mark implement the scope of work of a really broad and diverse work plan, but it involves a lot of technical assistance, not only to other practitioners, at other agencies, nonprofits, and kind of across the whole spectrum, but also to landowners. There's a lot of private rangeland that's in trouble, and also really good private rangeland that we want to help protect. And so we'll provide technical assistance on both sides of the fence there. Strategic planning effort that will take place under here that will set forth 20-year goals and 10-year action plans to help facilitate those goals. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to engage because the demand for technical assistance and certainly for financial assistance, especially after the catastrophic wildfires we had on the range last year, that need has never really been greater than it is now. So a lot of opportunity for us.
Thank you. And so this is my beginning slide, and I just had to say that it's it's a real delight and honor to be able to do this job. I don't get a lot happier than I'm walking around in really nice rangeland. It's pretty great. And it's an amazing gift that we have here in Oregon. And one of the things that I want to kind of emphasize just right off the bat, it's all over the state. It's variable kinds of things. It's the steep landscape of Hell's Canyon. It's out near Morrow County and breaks the Blue Mountains. Another slide from the Blues, because that's where I've been the last couple days, is there outside of Prairie City. And that slide in particular, I just want you to kind of take a look at and take a moment. I'll bring it up at our field tour later today and kind of make a connection for you. But it's really easy to get lost in the depressing message that we have really danger to our rangelands, and there's a lot of rangelands that are in peril, and that is true. But one of the things I really want to bring home today is that after spending the last 3 months since it got green, driving across our rangelands, there's some amazing country out there, and some of it's really underrated. It's private, it's public, and it's big. It's a lot of country. So what do we get out of our rangelands? A real quick overview. It is obviously a forage base. And that is a basis for communities all over Eastern Oregon, particularly. It is a water storage and release function. We have the safe capture of water, the storage of water, and that release of water over time. This is really connected to the rivers and streams that we have and springs. We get that soil carbon sequestration. Those roots of perennial grasses are pumps that produce carbon and organic matter in the soil. That creates soil health. We have biodiversity out in the sagebrush country and down in Hell's Canyon. We have rare and endemic plants. We have all sorts of critters that rely on this stuff. 350 species of wildlife in this mix in our rangelands. We have in our healthy rangelands a system that is adapted to and resilient to wildfire. When they're altered and dominated by invasive annual grasses, they are not anymore. And that's where we're going to go in a minute. But we also have this huge place where Oregonians and others can visit and recreate and be in open space. So it's an incredibly incredible value socially as well. And then at the end, I tacked on anadromous fish habitat. Because the other day in the middle of the sagebrush out by Brothers, which is in the middle of the sagebrush, right? We were talking about anadromous fish in the watershed because these streams, when we release them from juniper competition and others, bring fresh, cold water at a time and throughout the summer and season that's important to those fish. There's a slide that's going to pop up later. I think it might have got out of order, but that we will revisit that moment with some graphics. So some of the threats to Oregon's rangelands, of course, exotic invasive annual grasses, but cheatgrass, Medusa and ventonata. Cheatgrass and Medusa head are both, Medusa and ventonata are both listed as noxious weeds to the state of Oregon because of their impact. Cheatgrass we have not listed, but we do have a policy paper on recognizing its vast distribution and its regular contamination in crop and seed. We can't quite just call it a noxious weed and enforce on somebody's winter forage or so on, but we do recognize its role in the demise of healthy rangelands. So we have a policy that states we can work on that. When they invade, they change the fire regime. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this over time. But because annual grasses fill in interspaces between bunch grasses, it gives a continuous fuel bed that dries out early and stays dry long. And that allows fires to move through places that they wouldn't normally move through. And I wish I could give you pictures of the place in John Day that I stood 2 days ago, where you can stand and look at the juniper all around you, blackened, crown fire gone, and you're standing in a 40-acre patch of beautiful green bunch grass and flowers that was thinned, juniper removed 2 years ago and treated for invasive annual grasses, and in the Rail Ridge fire was unscathed. We really know what we can do with these tools to manage fires. Soil degradation happens when you lose roots, and then habitat fragmentation happens at a large scale for all the critters relying on the annual grasses when we fragment it with invaded annual grasses. How do they work? They compete, and this is the historic paradigm, they compete with our perennial grasses at the seedling stage. They are very rapid in their growth, and invasive annual grasses, they grow in cool seasons. But what we're realizing today is that they also put a huge pressure on our native perennial grasses that are mature. They rob the moisture availability from those plants so that they're in a continual state of drought stress. That keeps them greener for less time through the year and more susceptible to fire. That is also a reduction in forage volume through time and consistency and in variability. It is that fire risk we talked about, and it opens the system to other invasive plants. So our thistles and such that we talked about earlier make an opportunity of the invasive annual grasses. And the soil erosion, because we have a lack of roots, is a big deal when you get invasive annual grasses. Next slide, please. If we look at this picture of a native perennial community in our rangelands, we can see that there is between plants bare ground. There is space between plants. But that space is what we would call occupied bare ground. In other words, if you look underneath that bare ground, it's occupied by roots. The roots of the perennial plants, bunch grasses, sagebrushes, forbs that inhabit that. But when you fill in with the small, shallow root of the invasive annual grass in that layer of topsoil, they intercept the water going down to the roots below and creates the dynamic that I've been referring to. So the increase in annual grasses is something that today we can see, and we can see it from satellite imagery. In this slide from the Sagebrush Conservation Design, you can see the increase in cover of annual grasses over 18 years in the Great Basin. That should be disturbing. That's a lot of red showing up. The red is the invasive annual grass, dominated grasslands. The Sagebrush Conservation Design document states that we lose 1.3 million acres per year of really good perennial grass habitat to degraded state habitats. It's hard to come back if they go one more step to invasive annual grasses. We are challenged to rehabilitate them. Next slide. Here's the slide I was referring to earlier. This is not in the sagebrush country. This is in the Blue Mountains in Wallowa. And that is ventinata that you see, that white fluff in the foreground. And those are the perennial plants sticking up through that manage to survive so far. So you can see the amount of cover in that contiguous fuel layer in this photo. And then the next photo, not far away, we're out in the rangeland, and you can see the green perennial grasses that are still there. And this has been an actively managed site for many years, but the light colored are the annual grasses. And you can see the problem when you get a decent rain, which is a normal event. That soil is moving off-site. And then into the next slide, into our salmon and steelhead bearing streams. We need that soil on the slopes, catching water up there, producing carbon up there, and not in the streams impacting salmon.
We've all heard a lot about how wildfires are getting worse. This graphic up here kind of shows just how much acreage is being burned. Last year was a record-breaking year for acreage burned in fire, at 1.9 million acres burned. But we're also seeing decade by decade an increase in average number of acres burned. So if you look at, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and this decade, you see that that average is increasing by about 1.5 times every decade. And that's perpetuated also by this feedback loop of annual grasses, increasing wildfire intensity, which increases annual grasses. Next slide. These are some really cool photos taken by Dr. Toby Maxwell of USGS during a carbon sequestration monitoring study that he did out in the rangeland. So the picture on the far left is unburned, uninvaded, healthy sagebrush. There are patches of bare ground in between the sagebrush where the biocrust is undisturbed. In the next picture over, you see burned but uninvaded rangeland where the sagebrush has gone, it's been burned away, but the bunch grasses have bounced back, and the sagebrush should bounce back too, but it takes a long time. The next photo over is unburned but invaded sagebrush, taken very close to that first photo. You can see the butte in the background. So this area poses a risk of invasion to the healthy sagebrush in the first photo and also higher intensity wildfire if it comes through there. That last photo on the far right is burned and invaded rangeland. You can see there is no sagebrush visible. There are a few holdouts of perennial grasses that you can see poking up through the cheatgrass in there. This habitat sequesters very little carbon. It is not drought resilient. It provides poor habitat, low nutrient grazing, and it is not fire resilient at all.
And so we've mentioned a little bit about bare ground and bunchgrass systems, which is the majority of our rangelands. The center slide there, if you look at it, is standing from my height looking down at a camera in what was referred to me by the Crook County Soil and Water Conservation District, Andy Gallagher, staffer Andy Gallagher, said, this is in the heart of sage-grouse habitat in Crook County. And this is exactly what it should look like. And I'm looking across this big flat 12-mile table is what they call it. The sagebrush maybe 6 to 12 inches tall, and there's bare ground everywhere. And I was like, wow. Is that really? But that's where we get fire resilience, and that's occupied bare ground because of the roots underneath that soil, and that's just what it should look like. But when we have the annual grasses fill in, we change that whole dynamic, put the perennials in stress, drought stress, and then provide a fuel vector. So on the left, outside of Ukiah, Teddy Orr from Umatilla County did some trials with a new herbicide called Rejuvra, wherein he sprayed around. And you can see in the background that green and creamy looking swath. That was early this spring. And then in the foreground, there's a lot of native lomations and small bunch grasses. And that's the native plant community in that country. And you're not going to get a huge forage response up there because there isn't a lot of forage, a lot of soil. But you get a beautiful fire break and you get good native perennial response. On the right is one of the trials like that we will visit today. I'm just out of town here. This one happens to be over in Umatilla County. And it's, again, an herbicide trial where on the right-hand side you see what was not treated, the high presence of invasive annual grass, versus on the left, the low presence of invasive annual grass. Next slide. And one of the things I don't often like to mention names of chemicals by name, but this is a product. It is Rejuvra is the herbicide. It is an old herbicide. It's been in roadside work for years and years. And about 2015 in Colorado, they realized that they could apply the use of this indaziflam as the active ingredient on rangelands. It prevents germination and some degree root growth, but it's not an active plant killer. So it's able to hit those invasive annual grasses and leave the perennials just fine. So we'll talk more about that. It's a new tool that's pretty impressive.
And so, the task at hand here, right? It's a big one across a lot of landscapes, a lot of diverse landscapes. There's a lot of threats to this rangeland. And so, and we're trying to combat these threats, preventing the conversion of these high-value habitats to invasive grass-dominated stands, managing juniper and juniper encroachment, EDRR response to other invasive species and different threats, minimizing the disturbance that facilitates those invasive plants, restoring our native plant communities, engaging in post-fire recovery efforts, protecting our high-value and intact riparian areas, restoring the ones that need it, looking at grazing practices over time. We may talk about this a little bit in the field, and putting in context grazing practices 100 years ago, post-Taylor Grazing Act grazing practices, current grazing practices, and what our grazing practices might look like in the future in order to facilitate these resilient rangelands. And then, because we have this fragmentation and the habitat that's created out there is so important, ensuring that we either protect or restore or create wildlife corridors that create some connectivity between these high-value rangelands and across, maybe some of our more degraded spaces.
So Mark had kind of explained at least one of the new tools that Rejuvera to treat annual grasses and address that threat. Native juniper encroachment is another threat, and this is something that people have been addressing for decades, really. And I think now it was kind of a shotgun approach of projects, but now we're trying to connect the dots and connect properties. But also noting that it is native. Juniper is a native plant, and so we do want to acknowledge that. Not all of it is bad. We do want to retain some on the landscape and retain diversity, especially those old growth juniper that have furrowed bark and are really large and have kind of misshapen canopies. Those are valuable trees for wildlife to provide thermal cover for deer and elk. They produce berries for songbirds like cedar waxwing, so not all of it's bad. However, when it has become a blanket across the rangeland, that's where we are seeing, that's where the threat is. It displaces important vegetation like the native bunch grasses and forbs that are valuable forage for our wildlife. It reduces the biodiversity of the rangeland and the water availability. It decreases the availability of the water to reach those streams that will later impact anadromous fish species. And as we've mentioned, it does change the fuel load because juniper, I don't know if anyone's ever burned juniper, but it's very volatile. So imagine just a continuous bonfire across the landscape where it's not treated. And so you can see from this photo, this was in Crook County through an NRCS program. They're leaving some. They are leaving strips of juniper to maintain habitat diversity, but they're also creating wide breaks to reduce the threat of wildfire moving continuously across the landscape.
And so this is a big problem. And so we know we have limited funding. We know we have limited resources, staff, human resources, et cetera. So one of the things that's being pushed hard and thought about hard is where you work. It's not just anywhere. You don't throw in the middle of a sea of cheatgrass and decide you're going to restore native prairie, because it's probably not going to work. It's going to be incredibly expensive, and it'll be an island by itself. So flipping that on its head, we want to focus today, instead of reactive management, into proactive management, thinking about what is the intact cores, large spaces of perennial, native, biodiverse landscapes where we can protect those from invasion. So that's going to take all the tools, targeted grazing, it's going to take fuel breaks, it's going to take early detection and rapid response of invasive grasses and other species. It's going to take juniper management, grazing management. It might take interseeding, pasture rotations, changing in livestock class or breed, but also maybe even thinking about targeted grazing for fuel breaks. So all those tools come together in maintaining the health of those intact landscapes. It's a much lower investment than trying to fix what's already gone. The ambulance scenario that's shown there on the side, if I eat right and exercise and sleep well, I'm going to be way better off than if I wait till I have a heart attack and call the ambulance. The bill's on either side, and the outcomes are very different, right? So we want to work in that intact core, defend the core, and then those yellow areas that are transitioning, those are ones where we have the real opportunity to change the trajectory of the range by intervention, either with juniper or annual grass or both or other means, before we get to the degraded state. And we understand we'll have to work in the degraded state as well, but we're going to do different things there. We might plant crested wheatgrass for forage base and carbon storage, but not expect to restore a diverse native community. It's one of the things that we hope in this program to be connectors for and catalysts for. We're not going to bring the workforce ourselves, but hopefully develop and connect those people together. So that's our mode of operation these days, and we want to prioritize those areas that are really in good shape.
And so because of the scale and all the moving parts and all the people involved, the stakeholders that depend on this, it's really about us building capacity together as partner agencies. You've seen these kind of parallel paths that we're on, but all the connection points that we have and the opportunities to work together and provide technical assistance to each other, to landowners, to engage in consultation as we make plans on how we're going to approach some of these landscapes and figure out what we're going to do as we do those plannings, as we build and foster partnerships. A lot of new partnerships emerging, but also a lot of folks who've been engaged in this work for a long time, and so continuing to nurture and learn from those existing partnerships. Somewhat unique to ODA, we have some regulatory authority, and there may be a role as we move forward in our ability to regulate species through listing on, say, our noxious weed list or our protected, threatened, and endangered list. Those are tools, to help us protect these landscapes. Developing best management practices, not only for ourselves and each other, but that we can share with landowners and land managers across the region. And then hopefully bringing some money to the table one way or another. ODFW has different funding opportunities. NRCS has a bunch of different initiatives that really key in on these landscapes. And then there's other federally funded programs like the America the Beautiful grant program, one of which was recently successfully funded in the Brothers area. And so over the next few years and beyond, going to hear a lot about a lot of work that's happening out there in Central Oregon, and hopefully we'll be successful in duplicating and bringing a lot of that work to Northeast Oregon, down Southeast, Harney and Lake County, a lot of work to be done down there as well. And so what it really comes down to is us trying to build capacity together across a large landscape of land and of partners and stakeholders.
And I can't help throw another picture up of really cool rangelands. This is just outside of Vail in Ontario, in what we commonly refer to as the Big Ugly, but it's really a stellar place to run around in, and big open range country. But it brings to me that the idea of the size of the problem. And so we think about it, do we go big or do we go home? But we really are home here already. And I think the only choice, if we really want to keep our rangelands, is that we go big. We really need to grab all the partners and engage in these rangelands, which historically have been the leftovers. They weren't plowable, they weren't forested, they weren't a fishery, they weren't a meadow. They're dry and rocky and tough, but we recognize today the value in them. And I think we have the opportunity with the technologies and new tools and satellite imagery and partnership recognition across the West. You know, this is happening in Wyoming and in Montana and in Idaho. The Western Governors Association is engaged to really defend and grow the cores of these rangelands. So we hope that we can build that into the future in Oregon too.
Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you. Wow, I haven't thought about this arena in many, many years. I actually knew a little bit about it back then, but this was really, really helpful to understand what is really going on and the immediate need of the Go Big theme. So any questions, comments? Yes, Director Mogg.
This is Josh Zielinski for the record. I just had.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I missed you completely. Let's let Director Zielinski go, and then we'll have Director Mock go next. Sorry about
that. I just had a question about the junipers. I know they're native, and I was wondering, why are they encroaching more? I've heard about this, like, you know, you remove them and then all of a sudden like streams show up that haven't been there for years. But I'm curious, why are we seeing them more widespread or thicker thickets or whatever you want to call it?
I should have said that, but due to altered fire regimes would be one reason. So in the past, like, we would routinely have wildfires that operated at low intensity, moving through those perennial bunch grasses with the gaps. But because juniper are so volatile, even at those younger, especially at those younger stages, they'd just be wiped out. And so they would be retained in areas where we find old growth right now, where it's really rocky soil, where nothing else is going to grow there, where fire wouldn't get there because there's too much rock. So that's the primary reason why we're seeing that.
There are also a couple of other factors as well. Juniper really like disturbed soil, so areas of disturbance, the juniper like to take root there, and also where invasive annual grasses have kind of outcompeted the perennials, that kind of makes room for the junipers as well. So a few factors.
Great. Director Mogg.
Kirk Mogg for the record. So it's great to see two state agencies working together on this issue. In terms of kind of the interface between rangeland and public and private forest land, what work is being done with Oregon Department of Forestry and or private landowners or even U.S. Forest Service to manage fire risks even on a broader basis where we've got intersection of rangeland and forest land?
I might take a stab at that, if you will. I just was in Grant County, John Day Country 2 days ago. They held a tour for their invasive annual grass and fuels treatment models. We spent an entire day in the Ritter area and then I'll say it in a minute, but in two different areas of Grant County, wherein two things had happened, juniper thinning at large scale and then invasive annual grass treatments. They have, since Senate Bill 762, been investing large amounts of time, energy, and effort in fire resilience, particularly. They've used herbicide, the Rejuva herbicide, at large scales to treat over 125,000 acres. They put a ring around the city of Prairie City, basically, wherein they have fuel breaks there. Two of the sites we toured, one of them I mentioned earlier, where the fires came to treated sites and poof, died down. It wasn't that wasn't quite that clean, but they were very much fire resilient, and so that involved ODF and W. ODF. ODF and W was also present and accounted for, but partners from soil and water conservation districts and Forest Service were present and working. I think Forest Service and BLM each have unique NEPA and consultation and budget today, challenges that maybe don't allow them to move as quickly as private land and state lands do, but they're certainly headed that way, and the desire is strong for them to move there too.
Other questions? Yes, Director Boyer.
This is a question for Hillary. You had mentioned the wildlife tax deferral, and some counties have opted in. How many counties?
I don't know.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
It's not all of them.
But it's quite a few of them.
Great. I had just one more question and comment. Appreciate the fact that you actually named a product name, because people need to know that there's something out there that works. So really do appreciate that. And I have no affiliation with the company, so it's no conflict of interest. But I think one of the things too, you're talking about that for annual grass. But is it only mechanical removal for juniper, or are there any products that assist with, maybe mechanical and then treatment? I'm just, again, not understanding that area anymore.
I've never heard of anything besides mechanical removal for juniper, and often they do need to be retreated, those areas, because if you don't get the whole juniper, they like to sprout, and so there is a lot of retreatment. Our project down in near Prineville is a lot of retreatment of juniper that was treated 20 years ago. So yeah, it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing.
Great. And the Western Governors Association, what position have they taken, or is there kind of a policy document to say all states should try to work together and collaborate and share things? And
Not sure.
Yes, there is. I was hoping Troy would be able to quote it verse for you, but about 3 or 4 years ago, the Western Governors Association met. Idaho has the Cheatgrass Challenge. Wyoming has the Imagine Group, etc. And there was, I shouldn't talk too much, I believe a signed document policy paper that stated, hey, this is a real priority and we need to work on it and recognize the value of these rangelands. Yeah.
Okay. Director Hansen, did you?
If the board would like it, we can work at getting a copy of it.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. Again, just as we look at it's a holistic focus on this, and to have that be, a collaborative effort. And my last question is, when you're talking about NEPA with BLM and of course different consultation needs, has there ever been a thought of and I don't know if this has ever happened, like a generic NEPA that would understand the focus of the treatment, and then of course the in place has to be considered differently? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will comment as a peripheral partner in NEPA for 25 years with forests and BLM, and BLM's a little better at doing national NEPA and pushing that out, but in both entities, they have to do site-specific NEPA, and oftentimes it really requires them to do very redundant work. And so it is one of the inefficiencies. I just had a long conversation with a guy 2 days ago about that as one of the real primary things that would be wonderful to address in terms of federal efficiencies, is their ability to adopt NEPA throughout regions and states.
And that's a national debate right now on NEPA things, so it's also something to think about.
Wherever they can, they try to leverage, if something can be covered under an existing NEPA, they certainly give it the old college try to use that, but oftentimes we have to go through that process each time.
All right.
Chair Miller, could I leave with just one
Sure, absolutely.
remark? You've seen the scale of what we're dealing with. You've seen what's at stake. It's going to take us a very long time. It's going to take a lot of money, but it will span multiple careers. And we sit here at my alma mater, that at the time was the largest rangeland ecology and management program in the country by enrollment. That is no longer the case, and it's not even close. You'll hear from Penny tomorrow. It's really important that we support this next generation of practitioners, that we continue to elevate and raise the importance of this type of work, to engage with our youth and bring them into the fold, because we're going to be depending on multiple careers over decades and decades and decades if we're actually going to get to where we're trying to go. And so I just can't really stress the importance of that enough.
I guess as a follow-on to that, what in your estimate has been the change? Was there anything in particular that has driven lack of focus in this area, or because of concerns, anything that may be a barrier that we need to be aware of as we think about going big?
I think in particular with Oregon State, financial challenges of managing adjunct campuses and things like that, and I'm sure that's shared across the academic landscape. COVID didn't help anything in any arena, and so I'm sure there's a lot of different factors there, but I couldn't point to any one thing myself, but the need remains.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, beyond education, though, from just a focus on this area, is there something that
I think elevating the value, telling the story of, right, like Mark said, these are the forgotten landscapes as we talk about the range. These are the places that nobody wanted, and at the time didn't realize how important they really were to our way of life, to Oregon agriculture, to habitat, to all the things that we hold dear. They're kind of the linchpin to a lot of that. And so elevating that, telling those stories, and elevating the importance of this landscape and what it really means to our way of life, hopefully inspires people to invest their time and their careers into this stuff and spend their money.
Right. Well, maybe we have a nice subject matter, if not others, for our quarterly report that we're doing now on a regular basis as a board. So anyway, great. Thank you so much. And we'll be seeing more of you later today and in our tours. So
Put on your hiking
thank
shoes.
you. Yeah.
And your tennis shoes.
All right.
Got 'em.
Wear tennis shoes and not boots.
Boots are better.
Okay. All right. Good deal. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. And we are quite early. And so if there were any questions, not to pressure anybody, but if there were any questions on the divisional reports, while we have a few minutes, and we'll still break early, so you'll have quite a long break because we'll be coming back at 11 o'clock for our public comment, which we always keep that absolutely on time because people plan on public comment at 11. But if there were any questions in regards to the divisional reports or anything else we didn't cover in Director Hansen's report, open for questions or comments. And I just was looking at you, Director Boyer, so thank you. I thought there might be.
I have a quick question for Lisa. You mentioned a specialty crop block grants, and there used to be a board member as part of the review team. Is that still the case?
I need to look to Carla.
Okay. Because I was for years, just kind of like the liaison to that process. So I didn't know if it was of interest.
So if it is of interest,
Not for me,
and there's
not
a
for
board
me.
member that would like to volunteer,
Yeah.
please let me know. And we'll work with.
It's a really neat process, and it was fun to be a part of.
Could you describe what it takes
Just
to
to
do
review the applications and sit in on the meeting and listen to the panels, the what do they call them? The committee members' recommendations.
So is that kind of a time?
It's
amount of time that's.
Well, it's once a year, or is it every other year? Is it once a year or every other year? It's annual. Okay, and it's probably took me 3 days total.
Okay. Good. All right. That might be something we may be interested in, and we can, if anybody is interested, to let Director Hansen know that. The other couple things I had from the divisional report, and we may not have the answer right now, but for follow-up, and this was in regards to hemp compliance with whatever the project name was. I wrote it down earlier. The project that went in to analyze the THC, and we had, it looked like a majority of non-compliant areas. And I think the first time this was done, few years back, there was a pretty high level, and just if there were any action plans, and if we don't have the answer now, we can do that later for response.
Let's have Chris give a quick response that maybe.
Chris, thank you.
Response that I need to go back and get more information.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Miller, for your question. I will circle back with you. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific answer for that at this moment.
Yeah, because there was quite a bit of even press and other things after the last round, and just, again, it's where do we need to emphasize more, educate more, do other things. So good. Thank you. And my other comment was on the report for the governor, the practices that she has established now for, let's say, running government. And I read the governor's letter to Lisa, and let's just say, I think we should celebrate the fact that ODA has done a phenomenal job in all categories. There's a couple little things that we need to work on, which is, it's always management says, hey, and you need to think about this, but from a relativity standpoint, we've done exceedingly well, and I wanted to recognize that. And also at some point in time, and I mentioned this earlier, some of us have been involved in different government management roles in the past. And, all of this is really, really good stuff. And it's great to use it to our advantage particularly for our employees, because a lot of this is really very employee oriented to make sure things are working well. But we also want to make sure we don't overkill if there are some areas. And at some point in time, if and when it is appropriate, Director Hansen, if we could maybe spend a few minutes to talk about maybe some perspectives we could provide, if it is helpful, as a board, to say, hey, do we want to spend a lot of, because reporting a lot of stuff takes a lot of time to report, and doing it, and you need to make sure that everything you're doing is really value added. And I just caught a couple things that I think once you've established a little track record, that maybe doesn't need to be as repetitive. So.
We can have that conversation.
Okay.
At some point in the future.
Great. Good. Okay. Unless anybody else has anything, we have a nice long break to 11 o'clock with our public comment. Thanks.
Hey, Mike, if you're stressed out, you can go around the corner there and take a sledgehammer to a car.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that for about 3 years now.
Where's that?
It's right behind the building. And,
Our high school.
did they?
You know, maybe we should go do it as a photo op.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock, and we'll call the meeting back to order. It's time for our public comment, and we do not have anyone signed up here for public comment, but I'll ask if there's anybody remotely that wanted to provide public comment. We'll need to have you in the comment, in the chat. Go ahead and state your name and organization if you wish to comment. But in light of that, we have actually a guest again. We had Courtney Kroll with us when we were last in Salem, who's with the Governor's Office, Oregon Solutions, and other. But we do appreciate the fact that you're here with us today. And since we have a little time, it'd be great to have you make a couple comments. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Miller and Director Sharples-Hanson, thank you so much. For the record, my name is Courtney Kroll. I am the Governor's Regional Solutions Coordinator for Eastern Oregon, as well as a Natural Resource Advisor. So I've got ODA, I'm the Policy Advisor for ODA, and I live over here in Baker City, so it's very nice for you guys to come to my side of the state and not having to kind of trek over to the west side. So I just want to thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you all for your service. I know how much time it takes. I'm kind of the one bugging Lisa to make sure we've got good folks on the board who are committed, and sort of when we have openings, getting those openings filled. So thank you all. And I also just want to kind of reiterate some of the things that I've heard today. You know, the governor's been, you guys talked a little bit about her expectations around customer service and just the commitment to transparency and customer service for state agencies. ODA is doing a great job, so thank you, Lisa, for making my job easier in not having to have kind of those tough conversations about whatever the expectations that the governor does have. So great job. ODA has got a wonderful team, and it's really nice and easy to work with you guys. And then I also just want to reiterate, the governor has a huge commitment in the LaGrande, and, you know, ODA, Water Resources, DEQ, and OHA have all played a huge role over the past 2 years there. There's been a lot of collaborative interagency collaboration. So, and, you know, a lot of expectations from the governor around really leaning in and digging in. So that rules the RAC process that's going forward. We're following really closely and really thankful for the commitment that ODA is making to that. Thank you so much, Director Orem, for sitting on that. I think it's been a really great broad-based RAC, and I think we're excited about kind of where that future is going. I think the other really nice thing about that RAC is the overlap between both RAC members and the LaGrande Advisory Committee, which is an advisory committee that is under DEQ, but is really jointly managed by Water Resources, ODA, and DEQ. So those are things, and also just, you know, thank you guys for the commitment, ODA, through this legislative session. We've got a few more weeks, and I know there's definitely a few things still out there that we're hoping to get over the finish line, but so far, I think we're in a pretty good spot for ODA. So thank you, and I'll take questions if you guys have any for me.
Great. Are there any questions? It's really an opportunity to have you at 2 meetings in a row. Not saying that you have to head south, but, you know, it's kind of closer for you than some other people down at Klamath. So anyway, but any questions or comments from folks? Okay. Actually, I do have, and it's in regards to the RAC and the crossover with the advisory committee. Obviously, there's some overlap in people, but just, you know, from really the selection of that and how that came to pass and who's involved.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the process, but I do know that there is quite a bit of overlap because there's members that are both on the LaGrande Advisory Committee and the RAC, and I think that's was probably purposeful. And also, we wanted to make sure that we're giving constant updates to the full LaGrande Advisory Committee as well through the process. So they're getting those updates as well. But I don't know exactly how that process, Lisa might.
Thank you. If Isaac was online, I think he could give a more in-depth, but I think it was really important that we keep the history and the work that had been done by that LaGrande Advisory Committee over time. There has been a lot of work done. We haven't made the progress that we wanted to make in terms of changes. And so recognizing what had been done, what people had learned and what worked, and bringing that along, as well as then trying to balance the advisory committee with the other interests that are at the table and bringing them in and having a broad spectrum of representation in terms of the different farm sizes as well. It took a bit, and it's a big group, but there needs to be the consistency between the two because the advisory committee has been in place for a long time, and you don't want to disregard the effort that has been over the last 20 plus years.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, the one thing I'd like to ask you is how can we as a board work to help? Obviously, we work closely with Lisa, but work to also help you and the governor with priorities, as well as we hear things, and so we bring up things, and we bring up things maybe sometimes that aren't popular to bring up but have to be brought up for the discussion. But how can we, because you see other boards, how can we be more productive from your perspective?
That's a good question. I mean, Lisa and I are kind of we meet all the time. So, obviously that's a great entry point into kind of flagging stuff for me. But as I like to say to Lisa, and we like to say to all of our natural resource agencies, we like to hear things early, so we're not getting kind of caught off guard. So, I think as you guys are hearing from stakeholders and partners and just from the agriculture industry across Oregon, if you guys are hearing things that are popping up that, we might not have on our radar screen, or that might be even outside influences around, federal legislation or federal action, letting us know, either directly to me or through Lisa, I think is really good, because I think, Lisa talked about the pink shrimp. That was a great sort of example of how, we were hearing something from the industry, we were able to bring it to the governor's attention, and then we were able to take it back to DC and kind of a full circle moment. So as those things are happening, but also, it's really good for me to be able to just make sure that the governor is up to speed with good news that is also happening, or good, actions. So, I was able to really highlight I'm going to get the Chicago show that Lisa was just at, and we were able to highlight for the entire governor's office, not just the governor, all of the companies that were able to take there and really focus on domestic marketing. So I think those are some great ways for us to know both issues that are coming down the pike and concerns that you guys are seeing, but also good stories, right? And how they connect with maybe economic development or maybe other natural resource agencies. So anything like that, I would really appreciate kind of hearing. So, I think that's kind of my best answer.
Good. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. If there's nothing, Courtney, again, thanks. And if you can join us this afternoon, and I would, Klamath is going to be a great spot. So,
and I love the Klamath. So,
all right, good. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate that. So we are actually well ahead of time, and I'm stalling a little bit because the lunch is being set up, and so we've changed our plans, and some has to get appropriate shoes on, and others just want to be able to go back to the hotel. So what we'll do is we will eat, and then we will go to the hotel, and the vans will come to the hotel to pick us up for the tour. So that's the plan, and there may be something else I needed to announce, but you'll be assigned which van.
We'll just.
All be in one van.
No, we'll have two vans, but we don't have specific.
Oh, we're not assigning, that's right. Okay, so we actually need to split into 2 different groups, and you signed up yesterday for the vans to go out this afternoon, and we should be back by our last visit might end a teeny bit early. We were planning to be out at the fairgrounds at 4, but we might be there earlier than 4. And the idea would be we'd probably be done and headed back by 5:30-ish, a little before 6. So I know one of our directors has to drive all the way home and then be online with us tomorrow. So that should probably be able to accommodate that. So anyway, just for planning purposes. And also, Director Hansen had mentioned potentially our March meeting next year being at the FFA convention, and we're thinking about how that could work and be impactful for us, but we kind of have to change our format a little bit, but there is a sponsors evening where basically the industry shows up on Thursday night, which is really a big deal. And we've always been invited to attend the dinner if you'd had time to go over, but a lot of times people, couldn't make that time to go over. But if we had and orchestrated the meeting and then ended with that, and then their first session is right after that, which would be important to attend, and then you could be leaving on Friday, maybe. But if we, during the business session tomorrow, if you could give me any comments to say, hey, and we'll get you the exact dates. It's March, second week in March, starting Thursday, or third week in March. But to give us any comments on whether that Q1 meeting, and let's get on the calendar. The reason that we have to be so early is because hotel booking for, thousands of FFA members showing up in Redmond. So, yes.
I'll just add that we haven't been to Central Oregon for
Oh, yes.
at least 6 years or more.
Yes. We haven't been. And so I think that makes sense. And we can, even though we can think about tours, but we may have a different format in order to make it work. So, okay. Yeah.
And I've gone several times and manned the booth with staff. And it's actually might be fun if we rotate through the booth too, board members.
And that'd be Friday and Saturday.
Okay, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, or maybe stay Friday if you can to man booth, and yeah, good idea. Okay. All right, well, maybe we don't have to have a discussion about it, but if anybody has any concerns still, we can officially talk about it tomorrow too. So, okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and take our break. Board members, have your lunch. And then we'll head back to the hotel, and we will be leaving from the hotel